Welcome! Tonight, we are going to leave the familiar world behind. I invite you to settle into your blankets, find a position that feels natural and easy, and let the weight of the day begin to lift from your shoulders. We are setting out on a very long, very quiet journey. Our destination lies far beyond the warm, rocky planets of the inner solar system, past the orbit of Mars, and into the deep velvet blue of the outer reaches. This is a place where the giants dwell in the cold, silent dark, moving through their orbits with a slow and ancient grace. As we drift further away from the sun, the light becomes softer, more silver, like the glow of a dim lamp at the end of a long hallway. And there, emerging from the shadows of the deep, we find the most beautiful structures in our cosmic neighborhood, planetary rings. When we look at them from our distance, through the lens of a telescope or in the mind's eye, they look like delicate, glowing halos, celestial jewelry worn by the massive worlds they surround. They are elegant, shimmering, and seemingly perfect in their stillness, like a crown of light resting upon a king. Before we go any further into the details of these icy wonders, if you find that this quiet space helps you feel more at ease, I would be so grateful if you took a moment to subscribe and join our community. A gentle like or a soft comment helps us keep this little corner of the universe peaceful for everyone who needs it. We are so glad you have chosen to spend this time here with us. Tonight is about more than just looking at the stars. It is a peaceful exploration of the delicate balance between ice and gravity. It is a story of how something so massive can be so fragile, and how billions of tiny individual pieces can come together to create a single, breathtaking vision of order. We often think of space as a place of vast, empty chaos. But here, in the rings of the giants, we find a deep rhythmic peace. Everything is exactly where it is meant to be. As you feel your breathing slow down and your body relax into the softness of your bed, imagine these rings stretching out for hundreds of thousands of miles across the darkness. They are wide enough to hold worlds, yet they possess a delicacy that is hard to fathom. They are not solid, frozen disks, though they may appear that way from a distance. To truly understand how they can be so beautiful, we must first look at the quiet, invisible forces that hold them in place, the physics of their formation, and the eternal dance that prevents them from drifting away into the void. It is a symphony of motion that has been playing for millions of years, and tonight we are simply here to watch it unfold. We begin by looking closer, past the glow, to see what these rings are truly made of. What exactly is a planetary ring? When we see them in photographs captured by distant spacecraft or powerful telescopes, they look like solid, polished disks, perfectly flat, shimmering sheets of light that encircle a planet like a brim on a hat. But as we draw closer in our minds, the solid surface begins to dissolve. The illusion of a single, continuous object fades away, replaced by something far more intricate and delicate. A planetary ring is not a solid structure at all. Instead, it is a vast collection of billions, perhaps trillions of individual particles, each one a tiny world of its own. Imagine, for a moment, that you are drifting toward one of these rings. From a distance, it is a smooth ribbon of silver. But as you get closer, the ribbon breaks apart into a shimmering cloud of debris, you begin to see that the ring is actually a swarm of countless small objects all orbiting the planet together in a flat, wide plane. These particles are mostly made of water ice, though some are mixed with dust and rock. They range in size from microscopic grains no larger than a speck of dust floating in a sunbeam to massive boulders the size of houses or even mountains. Each one of these billions of particles is held in place by the invisible hand of the planet's gravity. They do not touch one another very often. Instead, they move in a synchronized, rhythmic orbit, traveling at thousands of miles per hour, yet appearing perfectly still relative to one another. It is fascinating to realize that these massive, majestic structures, which can be seen from millions of miles away, are actually made of such small, independent parts. We might call them independent dancers. Each grain of ice follows its own specific path around the planet, governed by the same laws of physics that keep the moon in our sky or the Earth in its journey around the sun. Because there are so many of them, and because they are so close together, they reflect the sunlight in a way that blends them into a single glowing form. This realization brings a sense of profound peace. In the vastness of the outer solar system, where the silence is absolute, these trillions of tiny dancers move in perfect harmony. They are not chaotic or colliding in a violent way. They are simply drifting, following the curve of space-time in a slow, eternal loop. They remind us that even the most grand and imposing things in the universe are often made of small, simple elements, working together to create something beautiful. Now that we understand what a ring is, a magnificent collection of orbiting ice and dust, we can begin to look at where these structures reside. In our solar system, the inner rocky planets like Earth and Mars travel through pods alone, without these shimmering crowns. But as we move further out into the realm of the giants, the story changes. We are entering the territory of the gas giants, the four great worlds that have mastered the art of gathering these celestial rings around them. As we travel further into the cold, quiet reaches of our solar system, we find the four great hosts that define the outer realm. These are the gas giants and the ice giants, massive worlds that hold court in the darkness. We have Jupiter, the king of planets, Saturn with its unmistakable glow, Uranus, the pale tilted world, and Neptune, the deep blue guardian of the furthest reaches. While we often think of these planets as being distinct and separate, they share a beautiful common secret. Each one of them possesses its own system of rings. For a long time, we looked at Saturn and thought it was a unique jewel, a solitary anomaly in the vastness of space. But as our eyes grew sharper and our spacecraft traveled further, we realized that rings are not an exception at all. They are a standard feature for the giant planets of our solar system. It is as if these massive worlds, by their very nature, are meant to be adorned. Their immense gravity acts like a gentle, invisible net, catching the dust and ice that drifts nearby and pulling it into a steady, orbiting dance. Jupiter's rings are thin and dark, made of fine dust that reflects very little light. Uranus has a collection of narrow charcoal-colored bands that encircle it like thin threads. And Neptune, far out in the freezing dark, has faint, delicate arcs that seem almost ghostly. Knowing that all four of these giants carry these structures changes how we view our cosmic neighborhood. It gives us a sense of scale and belonging. We begin to see that there is a predictable harmony to the way the universe builds itself. These rings are not chaotic accidents. They are the natural result of a planet reaching a certain size and majesty. In this quiet space, far from the sun's warmth, these four worlds stand as reminders of the grandeur of the laws of physics. They are massive, yet they hold on to things as light as a snowflake with incredible precision. There is a comfort in knowing that even in the most distant parts of our system, the same rules of gravity and motion are at work, creating a sense of order and beauty. It is a neighborhood of giants, each wearing its own unique crown of orbiting debris, moving through the silence of the vacuum in a slow, rhythmic pace that has lasted for millions of years. While all four giants are ringed, there is one that stands out above the rest, a world whose rings are so bright and so vast that they have captured the human imagination for centuries. To truly understand the wonder of these celestial structures, we must focus our lens more closely on the most famous system of all. We are drifting now toward the golden glow of Saturn, a planet that has turned the simple act of orbiting ice into a masterpiece of light and form. It is here that the concept of a planetary ring reaches its most magnificent expression. As we draw closer to Saturn, the golden hue of the planet begins to fill our vision, but it is the rings that truly command our attention. They sit around the planet like a magnificent crown of ice, a halo that stretches out into the dark velvet of space. When you see them from above or below, they appear as a solid, grand structure, spanning an incredible distance. The main rings reach out nearly 175,000 miles from one side to the other. To put that into perspective, if you were to lay them out across the gap between the Earth and the Moon, they would span nearly 3/4 of that entire journey. It is a scale that is difficult for the mind to fully grasp, a vast, shimmering plain of white and jade glowing softly in the distant sunlight. But as we change our perspective and drift toward the very edge of these rings, something remarkable happens. As we move to look at them edge on, they almost seem to vanish. Despite their immense width, stretching across the equivalent of many worlds, they are incredibly, almost impossibly thin. In many places, the rings are only about 30 feet thick. Imagine a small house or a modest tree. That represents the entire thickness of a structure that spans hundreds of thousands of miles. This contrast is one of the great wonders of our solar system. If you were to create a scale model of Saturn's rings using a sheet of paper, the paper would actually be far too thick to accurately represent how flat they truly are. They are like a razor-thin blade of light or a delicate gossamer veil caught forever in the planet's gravity. This extreme thinness gives the rings a sense of profound fragility. From a distance, they look like a solid, unbreakable disk. But in reality, they are a fine, flat layer of motion. They are a reminder of how gravity can flatten chaos into a perfect, orderly plane. You can imagine yourself floating just above this vast, icy sea, looking out across a horizon that seems to go on forever, yet knowing that just a few dozen feet below you, the rings end and the empty void begins again. It is a peaceful realization that something so large can also be so delicate and precise. As we hover here, watching the light play across these shimmering bands, we begin to look closer at what exactly these rings are made of to catch the light so beautifully. We start to see that this crown is not just a collection of distant shapes, but a treasure chest of frozen crystals, each one contributing to the brilliant, steady glow that has fascinated us for generations. As we drift closer to these shimmering bands, we begin to see the secret behind their brilliance. It isn't just their immense size that makes them stand out against the deep velvet blackness of the outer solar system. It is their incredible, almost startling purity. When we observe Saturn's rings, we are seeing a soft, golden-white glow that seems to radiate from within. But this light is actually a reflection, a gentle echo of the sun's rays, bouncing off a material so clean and bright that it rivals the freshest, most untouched snowfall on a quiet winter morning here on Earth. Scientists have discovered that these rings are composed almost entirely of pure water ice. To be precise, they are about 99.9% ice, with only the tiniest traces of rocky material or organic compounds mixed in. Imagine that for a moment. In the cold, quiet reaches of space, nearly 1 billion miles away from our sun, there is a vast floating reservoir of frozen water. It is as if a celestial ocean was once shattered into billions of pieces and spread out into a delicate, flat disk that never stops its circular journey. This extreme purity is the reason the rings are so spectacularly visible. If they were made of dark rock, carbon, or volcanic dust, they would be dim, ghostly shadows, nearly invisible against the void. But because they are made of ice, they possess a high albedo, a scientific term for reflectivity. They act like trillions of tiny individual mirrors. Even though the sun is very far away and its light is much weaker than what we feel on Earth, these icy particles catch every stray photon and scatter it back into the darkness. This is why Saturn appears to wear a crown of light rather than a belt of shadow. Take a slow, deep breath and imagine yourself floating in the very heart of this. Around you, in every direction, are countless crystals of ice. They are not packed together like the ice in a frozen lake. Instead, they are drifting, each one suspended in the silent, weightless vacuum of space. Some are as clear and sharp as a diamond, catching the distant sun and sending out a tiny, brilliant spark. Others have a soft, frosted finish, like the rime that forms on a window pane during a cold night. They catch the light at slightly different angles, twinkling softly like slow-motion stars that you could almost reach out and touch. It is a world made of frozen light, a landscape of eternal winter that never melts, never shifts its pace, and never breaks its silence. It feels cool, serene, and profoundly still. You are surrounded by one of the purest substances in the cosmos, a shimmering sea of white and silver that stretches toward the horizon. As you linger here, watching the light play across these frozen shapes, you might start to notice a strange variety in what you see. While all these particles share the same icy heart, they do not all share the same formal presence. We begin to look closer at the individual members of this vast family, seeing that this sea of ice isn't just a uniform mist. It is a complex world of vastly different scales. Some of these icy travelers are so small they are almost invisible to the naked eye, while others are massive, heavy, and imposing. As we prepare to move deeper into the rings, we begin to explore the incredible range of sizes that make up this celestial jewelry, from the smallest, microscopic grain of dust to the largest, mountain-sized giants that drift slowly through the flow. Within this vast, shimmering sea, there is a hidden architecture, a hierarchy of scale that is difficult to grasp from our distant home on Earth. From a distance, the rings look like a solid, smooth ribbon of light. But as we drift closer, the texture reveals itself. It is a world built of everything from the smallest, microscopic grain of dust to the grandest, mountain-sized giants. Imagine the smallest of these travelers. They are like the tiny dust motes you might see dancing in a shaft of golden afternoon sunlight in a quiet room. These microscopic specks are so light that they are almost ethereal, drifting like frozen smoke through the void. They are a delicate lace of the rings, filling the spaces between larger bodies and catching the light in a soft, hazy glow. Because they are so small, they are easily influenced by forces other than gravity. Even the gentle pressure of sunlight can nudge them, causing them to wander in ways the larger pieces cannot. As your eyes adjust to this landscape, you see the scale begin to grow. Beside the dust are pebbles of ice, then chunks the size of a snowball you might hold in your hand. Further along, there are boulders as large as a car, and then, looming silently in the flow, blocks of ice the size of a house. Imagine a house made of pure, translucent crystal, drifting without weight or sound, its jagged edges softened by uns of gentle, slow-motion collisions. These are the sturdy anchors of the ring, the heavy residents that give the structure its substance and form. They move with a dignified slowness, bumping into one another as gently as clouds passing in the sky, but the true wonders are the moonlets. These are the mountains of the ring system. Some are miles across, massive icy islands navigating the frozen river. These moonlets are large enough to exert their own tiny pull of gravity on the particles around them. As they travel, they act like celestial artists, sculpting the rings into intricate shapes. They create ripples and waves in the ice, much like a stone skipped across the surface of a still pond. To see a moonlet is to see a world within a world, a jagged, frozen peak that never knows the touch of wind or the weight of snow, only the endless, silent orbit around its giant parent planet. This incredible diversity creates a textured, three-dimensional landscape. It is not a flat, dead sheet of ice, but a complex city of frozen motion. There is a profound sense of order here, a balance where the smallest speck and the largest mountain follow the same rhythmic pulse. Each piece, no matter its size, is a dancer in a choreographed performance that has lasted for millions of years. You might find yourself wondering why these billions of individual pieces, from the tiny grains to the massive boulders, do not simply join together. In the silence of the cosmos, gravity is usually a builder, pulling fragments together to create moons and planets. Yet here, the ice remains shattered, spread out in a delicate, eternal suspension. It is as if An invisible hand is holding them apart, preventing them from ever becoming a single solid world. This is not a matter of chance, but the result of a powerful, invisible boundary in space. As we breathe in the stillness of this icy realm, we move toward that very edge, the silent line where gravity changes its role from a creator to a protector of the rings. This is the realm of the Roche limit. This invisible boundary is known to astronomers as the Roche limit, named after the French mathematician who first calculated its existence. It is a silent mathematical line in the dark, a threshold where the rules of the cosmos seem to shift ever so slightly. To understand it, we must imagine the dual nature of gravity. Usually, we think of gravity as a cosmic glue, the force that pulls dust into rocks, rocks into moons, and moons into planets. It is the great builder of the universe, the architect of every solid thing we can touch. But near a giant planet, gravity reveals a different side of its personality. Imagine a small moon, perhaps a lonely traveler made of ice and stone, drifting slowly toward the massive presence of a giant like Saturn. As it gets closer, the planet's enormous gravity begins to pull on it. But because the moon has a physical size, the side of it facing the planet is actually closer to the center of gravity than the side facing away. This creates a tiny, persistent difference in the strength of the pull. It is a celestial tug of war. The planet is pulling more strongly on the front of the moon than on the back. As the moon crosses the Roche limit, this difference in gravity, what scientists call tidal forces, becomes stronger than the moon's own internal gravity holding it together. It is a moment of quiet, inevitable transformation. The moon is not crushed or broken by a sudden blow. Instead, it is gently and systematically disassembled. It is pulled and stretched like a piece of soft dough in the hands of a baker until it can no longer maintain its shape. It unravels. The moon becomes a stream of fragments, spreading out into a circle, eventually flattening into the shimmering rings we see today. Most of the magnificent ring systems we admire exist safely inside this Roche limit. This is the reason why the billions of icy particles do not clump together to form a new moon. They are held in a state of permanent suspension, caught in a beautiful middle ground. They are too close to the planet to ever become a single, solid world. But they are held firmly enough in orbit that they will never fall away into the deep void. It is a place of exquisite balance, where the force that prevents the birth of a moon is the very same force that creates the splendor of the rings. There is a profound peace in this realization. We often think of the universe as a place of collisions and chaos, but here, in the shadow of the gas giants, we find a perfect rhythmic equilibrium. The rings are a testament to the idea that even when something is pulled apart, it can become something even more beautiful. The destruction of a small cold moon is the creation of a celestial crown. The fragments do not wander aimlessly. They find their place in the grand design, moving in harmony with the laws of physics that govern every atom in existence. In this space, within the Roche limit, everything is exactly where it needs to be. The particles of ice are not lost. They are simply part of a different story now. As we contemplate this invisible boundary and the grace with which gravity sculpts the rings, let yourself feel that same sense of balance. There is no rush, no urgency in the movement of the cosmos. Everything happens in its own time, according to a slow and steady pulse. Take a moment now to simply be still. Let the image of the shimmering ice fields rest in your mind. Notice the quiet around you, the way the air feels cool and still. Like the particles in the rings, you are supported. You are held in a gentle, steady embrace by the world around you. Let your thoughts drift, as light as a grain of cosmic dust floating in the velvet dark. There is nothing you need to do and nowhere else you need to be. Just breathe slowly and deeply, and let the silence of the outer solar system settle over you like a soft, heavy blanket. The universe is wide and calm and very, very old. And in this moment, you're a part of its perfect, silent order. As we drift further into the quiet of the outer solar system, take a moment to notice where you are right now. Feel the weight of your body as it sinks into the mattress, finding its own natural center of gravity. Perhaps you can feel the softness of the pillow beneath your head, a gentle, cooling support that requires nothing from you in return. Just as the invisible hands of gravity hold the icy particles of Saturn's rings in their perfect, eternal orbits, the surface beneath you holds you safely in place. There is a profound comfort in the way things are weighted, the way the world rises up to meet you, allowing you to let go of the need to hold yourself upright. The universe is not a place of frantic motion, though we sometimes imagine it so in our busy lives. Out here, billions of miles from the warmth of the sun, time seems to stretch and slow down until it feels almost stationary. The movements of the planets and their rings are entirely predictable, following paths that were set in motion long before we were born, and will continue with steady precision long after we are gone. There is no hurry in the cosmos. The stars do not rush to shine, and the planets do not race to finish their orbits. Everything moves with a slow, rhythmic grace, like a deep, quiet breath taken over millions of years. This predictability is a form of kindness. It is the ultimate reassurance that the foundation of everything is stable and certain. Allow your own rhythm to match this celestial pace. Let your breathing become slow and steady, mirroring the gentle, heavy rotation of the gas giants. Each inhale is a quiet expansion, like the rising of a distant moon, and each exhale is a soft release, a letting go of the day's noise and the weight of your thoughts. You are a part of this grand, predictable order. The same laws of physics that govern the shimmering bands of ice around Saturn are at work within you, keeping your heart beating and your breath flowing without any effort on your part. You are safe in the hands of a universe that moves with a slow, ancient wisdom. Now, with your mind clear and your body at rest, let us return our gaze to the magnificent structure of Saturn's rings. When we look at them from a distance, through the lens of a telescope or in a photograph, they appear as a solid, unbroken disk of light, a singular halo of golden white. But as we drift closer in our imagination, floating through the velvet dark of the sub-zero void, we begin to see that this crown is not a single, uniform piece. It is a complex tapestry, woven with threads of light and shadow, organized into distinct sections that each have their own character. Between the shimmering bands of ice, there are spaces, vast, silent corridors where the light dims and the density of the particles changes. These gaps are not empty voids of nothingness, but rather carefully defined paths like the aisles in a grand silent library. They are the features that give the rings their texture and their depth. These spaces are not accidents of nature. They are part of the intricate architecture of the system, carved out by the invisible hands of gravity and the subtle influence of the moons that dwell nearby as we prepare to move through one of these great dark paths. Remember that even in the spaces where there seems to be nothing, there is a perfect mathematical reason for the silence. As we drift closer to Saturn, our eyes are drawn to a striking feature, a bold, dark line that seems to split the rings in two. This is the Cassini division, named after the astronomer Giovanni Cassini, who first glimpsed this shadow in the 17th century. To the naked eye, it looks like a clean, sharp break, a void of nothingness carved into the shimmering ice. It is a vast, silent corridor stretching nearly 3,000 miles wide. To put that into perspective, you could fit the entire width of the United States within this single gap with room to spare. It is a monumental piece of celestial architecture, a grand highway of shadow that separates the dense, bright B ring from the slightly more delicate A ring. As we imagine ourselves floating into this space, we find that the darkness is not quite what it seems. From far away, the Cassini division appears as black as the surrounding space, but as we move through it, we discover that it isn't actually empty. It is simply less crowded. While our main rings are packed with billions of icy boulders and crystals, the division contains only a sparse dusting of material. It is like moving from a dense, heavy snowfall into a light, mist-like fog. The particles here are smaller and much further apart, allowing the blackness of the background stars to peek through, creating the illusion of a total void. It is a place of transition, a quiet bridge between two different worlds of ice. But why does this gap exist at all? Why hasn't the ice simply drifted back in to fill the space over the millions of years the rings have existed? The answer lies in a beautiful, invisible phenomenon called orbital resonance. Outside the rings, the moon Mimas orbits Saturn in a steady, rhythmic dance. Because of the way gravity works, any particle sitting within the Cassini division orbits the planet exactly twice for every one time that Mimas completes an orbit. This creates a gentle, repeating gravitational tug. It is like a parent pushing a child on a swing at just the right moment. Each small nudge adds up over time. Over eons, these rhythmic tugs have nudged the icy particles out of this specific lane, herding them toward the inner or outer edges and leaving behind this magnificent dark path. There is a profound sense of order in this. The universe doesn't leave things to chance. It follows a design written in the language of gravity and time. Even the silence of the Cassini division is a testament to the power of these invisible forces, working together to maintain the balance of the system. As we linger here in the quiet of the gap, Feeling the immense scale of the rings on either side of us, we begin to notice that the edges are remarkably sharp and well defined. They don't just fade away into the dark, they are kept in place, held by the watchful presence of other, smaller moons that drift nearby. These are the guardians of the rings, the silent sentinels that ensure every grain of ice stays exactly where it belongs, maintaining the perfect symmetry of the crown. These guardians, often no larger than a small city, are the reason the rings maintain their sharp, crisp edges, instead of slowly dissolving into a hazy cloud of dust. Astronomers call them shepherd moons, a name that perfectly captures their role in the celestial landscape. Just as a shepherd on earth might guide a wandering lamb back to the safety of the flock, these moons use the invisible hand of gravity to keep billions of wandering ice particles in their proper place. Among the most famous of these silent protectors are Pan and Daphnis, two tiny worlds that live within the very gaps they help to create and maintain. Imagine the moon, Pan, a small, curiously shaped world drifting through the ink gap. As it travels along its orbit, its gravity acts like a gentle broom, sweeping the path ahead and behind it. Any stray ice particle that dares to drift into the gap is either nudged back into the main body of the ring or pulled toward the moon itself. It is a constant, quiet process of housekeeping that has been happening for millions of years, far out in the cold reaches of space where no human eye could see it until very recently. There is something deeply peaceful about the thought of these small moons working so diligently in the dark, ensuring that the grand design of the rings remains intact. The moon, Daphnis, performs a similar duty within the much narrower Keeler Gap. Though it is only about 5 miles wide, barely a speck against the vastness of Saturn, its presence is felt by every grain of ice nearby. As Daphnis passes, the particles at the edges of the gap react to its gravitational pull. They don't just move out of the way, they dance. Because the moon's orbit is slightly tilted, it pulls the particles upward and downward as it passes by them. It doesn't just clear a path, it sculpts the ring material into something new and unexpected. This interaction brings a sense of profound order to what might otherwise seem like a chaotic swarm of debris. In the vastness of the solar system, where distances are measured in millions of miles and forces are often destructive, these shepherd moons represent a different kind of power. It is a power of maintenance, of care, and of balance. The rings are not merely a collection of rocks and ice left to the whims of the void. They are a managed system, a celestial garden tended by these tiny rocky hands. As we watch these moons go about their slow, rhythmic work, we begin to see that their influence extends beyond just keeping the gaps clear. They leave a lasting mark on the very fabric of the rings themselves. The interaction between the moons and the ice particles creates a series of stunning visual phenomena that look like ripples on the surface of a calm pond. As the moon passes, its gravity creates waves that travel through the ice, turning a flat two-dimensional disk into a living, breathing landscape of peaks and valleys. These waves are the first sign that the rings are far more complex than they appear from a distance, revealing a hidden world of motion and texture that we are only just beginning to understand. These ripples, tell a story of a sea of ice that is never truly still. Imagine the rings not as a frozen still image, but as a vast, shimmering sea of ice. It is a sea that experiences its own kind of weather, its own tides, and its own waves. When we look at Saturn from a great distance, the rings appear as a perfectly flat, thin sheet of light, as smooth as a polished mirror. But as we drift closer, letting our perspective soften and sink into the details, we find that the reality is far more textured and dynamic. The rings are alive with motion, responding to the invisible hands of gravity that reach out from the moons nearby. Within the dense material of the A-ring, there are hidden travelers, tiny moonlets, perhaps only a few hundred meters across. These small bodies are not quite large enough to clear a massive permanent gap, but they are strong enough to leave a signature in the ice. As they push through the crowded field of particles, they create what astronomers call propeller features. These are twin streaks of disturbed material, shaped like the blades of an airplane propeller, stretching out ahead and behind the moonlet. They are like small wakes left by a ship in a dark, silent ocean, a subtle, beautiful sign of a hidden presence moving through the deep. But the movement within this icy sea isn't just horizontal. In certain parts of the rings, specifically near the edges of the gaps where the shepherd moons reside, the ice doesn't just sit in a flat plane, it rises. The gravitational pull of moons like Daphnis reaches out and lifts the ice particles out of their level orbits, pulling them upward and pushing them downward. This creates vertical ripples, towering waves that rise and fall in a rhythmic, undulating pattern. In most places, the rings are incredibly thin, often no thicker than a two-story house. Yet, in these areas of gravitational disturbance, the waves can become truly monumental. Some of these vertical ripples tower as high as 2 miles above and below the ring plane. To put that in perspective, imagine a structure so thin it is almost invisible when viewed from the side. Yet it contains mountains of ice twice as high as the clouds on Earth. During Saturn's equinox, when the sun hits the rings at a very low angle, these waves cast long, dramatic shadows across the surrounding ice, revealing a rugged, three-dimensional landscape that is usually hidden from our sight. Visualizing this changes everything. The rings are no longer just a flat disk. They are a complex world of peaks and valleys, of deep shadows and brilliant highlights. It is a celestial architecture where gravity acts as the master builder, constantly shifting and shaping the ice into new temporary forms. There is a profound peace in this slow-motion choreography, a sense of height and depth occurring in the absolute silence of the vacuum. As we follow these waves toward the edges of the great gaps, we find ourselves drawn back to the Enki Gap, that wide, dark path we encountered earlier. This 300-mile wide stretch of space is not just a void. It is the domain of a very specific resident. This moon has spent its entire existence being shaped by the very rings it inhabits, becoming a tiny frozen world that serves as a perfect example of how the rings and their moons are forever linked in a delicate cosmic embrace. In the very heart of the Enki Gap, a moon named Pan glides through the darkness, performing a role that is as much about art as it is about physics. Pan is a tiny world, barely 20 miles across, Yet it possesses a shape so distinct and peculiar that it has captured the imagination of everyone who has seen its portrait sent back by the Cassini spacecraft. It is often affectionately called the celestial walnut, or sometimes more playfully, the cosmic raveli. This unusual shape is a direct result of Pan's life within the rings. As it orbits Saturn, Pan acts as a gentle gardener for the ink gap, keeping the path clear of stray particles. But as it sweeps through the icy dust, some of that material is caught by the moon's subtle gravity. Instead of falling randomly across its surface, the dust and ice grains migrate toward Pan's equator. Over millions of years, this accumulation has built up into a prominent, sharp-edged ridge that circles the moon's middle like a frozen skirt. When you look at Pan, you are seeing a moon that has been physically sculpted by the ring system itself. It is a world wearing a coat made of the very rings it inhabits. The ridge is remarkably tall and thin, giving the moon a flattened appearance that echoes the architecture of the wider Saturnian disk. There is a quiet beauty in this relationship, a small, solid world shaped by the soft, drifting dust of its surroundings. It is a reminder that in the universe, even the smallest influences, when given enough time, can create something entirely unique and unexpected. Pan sits there in the silence, a tiny frozen monument to the power of slow, steady change. It reminds us that not every world needs to be a perfect sphere to be beautiful. There is a certain charm in the irregular, a peacefulness in the way Pan carries its gathered treasure through the void. It is a solitary figure, yet it is never truly alone, always surrounded by the shimmering curtains of ice that define its existence. It feels right to imagine it there, a small, walnut-shaped guardian drifting forever in its dark, private lane. As we leave the intricate, frozen jewelry of Saturn behind, we begin a long, quiet journey across the cold reaches of space toward another giant. We move away from the bright, reflective purity of Saturn's water-ice rings and head toward the largest planet in our solar system. Jupiter, the massive, striped king of the planets, looms ahead in the darkness. For a long time, we believed Jupiter was a solitary giant, devoid of the ornamentation we see around Saturn. But as we draw closer, peering through the dim light of the outer solar system, we begin to see that Jupiter, too, possesses a crown, one that is far more subtle, dark, and mysterious than the one we have just departed. As we drift away from the brilliant icy glow of Saturn, the space around us becomes deeper and darker. We are approaching Jupiter, the undisputed king of our solar system, a world of immense gravity and swirling, colorful storms. For hundreds of years, astronomers looked at this massive giant through their telescopes, cataloging its beautiful banded atmosphere and its 4 largest moons. They saw a world of power and scale. But for all that time, something was missing from the picture, something hidden in the shadows of the giant's massive frame. Unlike the dazzling snowy rings of Saturn that announce themselves to any observer with even a modest telescope, Jupiter's rings are shy. They are not made of the bright, reflective water ice that we just explored. Instead, they are dark, thin, and composed of fine, microscopic dust. If Saturn's rings are a crown of diamonds, Jupiter's are a whisper of smoke. They do not shimmer in the sunlight. They absorb it, blending into the blackness of the void. They are so faint and so narrow that they seem to exist only on the edge of visibility, like a memory that is difficult to fully grasp. For centuries, we simply did not know they were there. Even the great Galileo, who first saw Jupiter's moons, had no inkling that the planet possessed a ring system of its own. It remained a secret, a quiet mystery held close to the planet's side, until the spring of 1979. It was then that the Voyager 1 spacecraft, a lonely explorer traveling through the outer reaches, turned its camera back toward the planet from a very specific vantage point. By looking back toward the sun, the spacecraft caught the rings in a moment of forward scattering light, much like how you might see tiny dust motes dancing in a sunbeam in a darkened room. In that single, quiet moment of discovery, our understanding of the King of Planets changed forever. We realized that rings were not a unique gift given only to Saturn, but a feature that could be subtle, dark, and nearly invisible. There is a profound sense of peace in the realization that even the most studied objects in our sky still hold secrets. Jupiter has been a fixture of human wonder since the first person looked up at the night sky, yet its rings remained hidden for almost the entirety of our history. It is a reminder that the universe does not always reveal itself all at once. Sometimes beauty is found not in the brightest glow, but in the softest shadow. It requires us to be patient, to change our perspective, and to wait for the light to hit things just right. As we linger here in the presence of this giant, looking at these faint dusty bands that were once invisible to us, we begin to wonder about their origin. If they are not made of bright ancient ice, what are they? And where does this fine dark material come from, constantly replenishing these ghostly circles in the silence of the Jovian system? It is a world of smoke and mirrors, where the structures we see are far more fragile than they appear. If you were to fly through Jupiter's rings, you might not even realize you were inside them. They are so incredibly thin and sparse that they are often described as gossamer. The word gossamer itself feels soft on the tongue, and it is a fitting name. It originally referred to the delicate silvery threads of a spider's web catching the light on a still, quiet morning. Jupiter's rings possess that same translucent, ethereal quality. They are not composed of the brilliant, house-sized blocks of ice we found around Saturn. Instead, they are made of fine, microscopic dust. Particles so small they are comparable to the particles of smoke produced by a guttering candle. This dust is dark, likely containing rocky material and carbon-rich compounds that do not reflect much light. But where does such a delicate structure come from? In the silence of the Jovian system, a fascinating process is constantly at play. These rings are not ancient relics from the dawn of time. They are being created right now in a slow and steady rhythm. The source of this material lies with Jupiter's inner moons, small rocky companions named Adrastea, Metis, Amalthea, and Thebe. Imagine these tiny moons orbiting the giant planet, moving through the void with a quiet, steady persistence. As they travel, they are occasionally struck by interplanetary meteoroids, tiny fragments of rock and metal wandering through space at high speeds. When one of these meteoroids impacts the surface of a moon like Adrastea or Metis, it doesn't leave a lasting crater in the way a massive asteroid might. Instead, the impact kicks up a cloud of fine powdery dust. Because these moons are so small, their gravity is very weak. They cannot hold on to the dust they've created. Like a handful of sand tossed into a gentle breeze, the particles drift away from the moon's surface and enter their own orbits around Jupiter. Over thousands of years, these individual grains spread out, smoothing themselves into the thin circular bands we observe today. There is a profound peace in this cycle of impact and renewal. It is a cosmic conversation between the moons and the planet. The rings are constantly losing material as Jupiter's immense gravity and magnetic field pull the dust inward, dragging it down toward the planet's swirling clouds. Yet, for every grain that is lost, a new one is born from a distant collision. The rings are a living thing, a temporary masterpiece that is being repainted every single day. As you breathe in slowly and feel the stillness of your own surroundings, imagine that constant, gentle rain of dust in the outer reaches of our solar system. It is a process that happens in total silence, far beyond our sight, yet it creates a structure of immense beauty. It reminds us that even the smallest events, the strike of a tiny pebble against a distant moon, can contribute to the grand architecture of the heavens. But as we drift further away from the king of planets, the familiar rules of the solar system begin to tilt. We leave behind the dusty smoke of Jupiter and head toward a world of deep, icy blue. We are approaching Uranus, a planet that seems to have its own unique perspective on the universe. Here, the very orientation of space feels different, as if the planet itself decided to lie down and rest among the stars. As we drift further into the cold, quiet reaches of the outer solar system, we encounter a world that challenges our very sense of up and down. Imagine, for a moment, the planet Uranus. In the vast, dark theater of space, most planets spin like upright tops, their equators level with the plane of their orbits. But Uranus is different. It is a planet that seems to have found its own peaceful way of being. Billions of years ago, perhaps through a gentle but massive nudge from a passing body, Uranus was tilted almost entirely on its side. It rests at an angle of 98 degrees, appearing to lie down against the velvet backdrop of the stars. This unusual tilt creates a visual masterpiece that is unlike anything else in our neighborhood. Because the planet is tipped over, its rings do not encircle its middle like a belt. Instead, they appear to stand upright from our perspective, encircling the planet like a series of celestial halos or vertical loops. If you were to approach Uranus from the side, it wouldn't look like a spinning marble. It would look like a ball rolling along its orbital path, with its rings spinning around it like the wheels of a quiet, ghostly carriage. It is a surreal, dreamlike image, a giant, pale blue orb rolling through the deep indigo of the outer system, draped in thin, upright ribbons of shadow and light. These rings are far more subtle than the grand, sprawling sheets of Saturn. While Saturn's rings are broad and bright, the rings of Uranus are narrow, sharp, and incredibly precise. There are 13 known rings in total, and most of them are only a few miles wide. They are like delicate threads of dark silk stretched tight across the void. From a distance, they are nearly invisible, hiding in the shadows of the planet's long, cold seasons. Each ring is distinct, separated by wide stretches of empty space, creating a sense of minimalist order. They don't crowd the planet. They frame it with a quiet, understated elegance. There is a profound stillness in visualizing this sideways world. As you settle deeper into your bed, imagine the slow, rhythmic roll of Uranus as it makes its 84-year journey around the sun. The rings follow this motion perfectly, never wavering, held in place by the invisible hands of gravity. They are dark, almost ghostly, reflecting so little light that they were not even discovered until the late 20th century. Unlike the brilliant reflective ice of Saturn, these rings have a different story to tell, a story written in a much darker ink. As we look closer at these narrow bands, we begin to wonder what could make them so dim, so different from the shimmering crowns we've seen before. The answer lies in the very dust and stone that composes them, materials that hold secrets of the deep, cold chemistry of the outer dark. Imagine something darker than the darkest coal you can picture, something as black as the soot in a chimney or the deepest parts of a cave where no light ever reaches. This is the reality of the ring surrounding Uranus. While Saturn's rings catch the sunlight and throw it back at us like a million shimmering mirrors, the rings of Uranus seem to swallow the light whole. They are silent, somber ribbons of shadow, tracing their vertical paths around the pale blue-green planet. If you were standing nearby in the cold vacuum of space, you might not even see them at all, unless they pass directly in front of a distant twinkling star, causing it to blink out for just a moment before reappearing. Why is there such a stark difference? Why does one planet wear a crown of diamonds while another wears a veil of charcoal? The answer lies in the very chemistry of the outer solar system. We believe that, like Saturn's rings, these structures are largely composed of water ice. However, here, so far from the warmth and light of the sun, the ice is not pure. It is mixed with complex organic compounds, carbon-rich materials that have been drifting in the deep cold for eons. Over millions of years, these particles have been bombarded by high-energy radiation from the sun and cosmic rays from the far reaches of the galaxy. This constant, invisible rain of energy acts like a slow-burning oven, cooking the organic molecules on the surface of the ice. This process, often called radiation processing, transforms the clear white materials into dark, complex substances. It is a slow, quiet transformation, turning once bright crystals into something that resembles charcoal or obsidian. There is a unique beauty in this dark side of science. It invites us to appreciate the subtle textures of the universe. These rings are not flashy. They are understated. They represent a different kind of elegance, one born of age, radiation, and the deep, cold chemistry of the outer dark. They don't demand your attention with brilliance. Instead, they reward the patient observer who knows where to look. There is something deeply peaceful about this darkness. It isn't a scary or empty dark. It is the darkness of a soft velvet curtain or a quiet room at night. It is the color of rest. These rings exist in a state of perpetual, humble shadow, content to circle their giant host in near total obscurity. They remind us that not everything in the universe needs to be bright to be significant. Sometimes the most fascinating stories are the ones told in whispers, hidden in the shades of gray and black. As we leave the sideways world of Uranus behind, our journey takes us even further out, to the very edge of the giant planetary family. Here, we find Neptune, the wind-whipped blue marble of the deep. Neptune, too, has its own set of rings, but they hold a mystery that even the dark ribbons of Uranus cannot claim. As we drift toward this distant, sapphire world, the structures we see are not complete circles, but something far more strange and fragile. They appear as incomplete arcs, like broken jewelry or scattered pieces of a puzzle that shouldn't, by the typical laws of physics, stay together. And yet, they remain perfectly in place. Neptune is a world of deep sapphire blues and howling winds, but as we approach its ring system, we notice something that defies our expectations of how the universe should look. In our journey so far, we have seen rings that are vast, thin disks, and rings that are narrow, dark ribbons. But Neptune's rings possess a mystery that feels almost impossible. When we look closely at its outermost ring, known as the Adam's ring, we don't see a continuous, unbroken circle of dust. Instead, we see distinct, bright clumps of material, long, shimmering arcs that seem to hang in space, refusing to spread out and fill the rest of the circle. In the language of physics, these structures shouldn't really exist. Over time, the laws of motion suggest that these particles should drift apart, eventually evening themselves out into a uniform thin line around the planet. And yet, there they are, 4 prominent arcs named Liberty, Equality, Fraternity, and Courage. They look like pieces of a celestial puzzle that have been frozen in time, or like broken jewelry floating in the deep navy blue of the outer solar system. These arcs are not just scattered dust. They are dense, concentrated regions of ice and rock that have remained in their specific positions for as long as we have been watching them. The secret to this strange stability lies with a small, silent guardian nearby, a moon named Galatea. Just as we saw shepherd moons at Saturn, Galatea plays a vital role here, though its influence is even more subtle. Through a complex gravitational relationship, Galatea's pull acts like an invisible container. It creates a series of gravitational wells or pockets that trap the ring material, preventing it from wandering away. It is a delicate, invisible architecture, a structure built not of solid walls, but of the gentle, persistent tug of gravity. The moon and the rings are locked in a rhythmic dance, a state of resonance, where every movement is perfectly balanced by another. There is a profound sense of fascination in this broken symmetry. We often think of the universe as a place of perfect circles and smooth lines, but Neptune's rings remind us that there is beauty in the incomplete. These arcs are beautiful precisely because they are unexpected. They represent a moment where the chaos of the outer solar system has been gathered into a specific, intentional shape. It is a reminder that even when things seem fragmented or unfinished, there is often an underlying order holding them together, a quiet force ensuring that everything stays exactly where it needs to be. As we linger here at the edge of the blue giant, watching these arcs of dust drift slowly through the dark, let your own focus begin to soften. Just as the moon Galatea holds those particles in a gentle embrace, let the space around you hold you in place. take a moment to notice the steady rhythm of your own breathing. Much like the predictable orbits of these distant worlds, your breath is a constant, reliable presence. Feel the air move in and out, slow and unhurried. There is no need to rush, and there is nowhere else you need to be. You are here in the quiet, safe reaches of the outer solar system, where the light is dim and the movements are slow. Allow the weight of your body to settle deeper into your bed, letting go of the day as we prepare to drift even further into the peaceful silence of the stars. As your breath continues its slow, steady cycle, imagine the thoughts of your day as small, stray particles of dust. See them drifting away from you, losing their weight and their urgency as they move further into the soft, dark velvet of the background. There is no need to hold on to them anymore. They are simply part of the distance now, small and inconsequential compared to the vast, peaceful reaches of the outer solar system. You're moving away from the noise of the world, entering a space of profound and absolute quiet. Now, imagine yourself not just observing the rings from a distance, but existing within them. You are floating, weightless, and completely at ease, in the midst of a shimmering field of ice. All around you are billions of individual crystals ranging from the size of a grain of sand to the size of a mountain. But they are not moving quickly relative to you. You are all traveling together in a grand, silent procession around a distant, massive planet. The sensation is one of total suspension. There is no up and no down here, only the gentle, rhythmic flow of the orbit. The ice particles around you catch what little light reaches this far out, glowing with a soft internal luminescence. They look like floating diamonds or shards of polished glass tumbling slowly in the void. As you drift among them, you realize that there is no friction here, no resistance. You are simply moving in harmony with the laws of gravity, a part of a system that has been in motion for millions of years and will continue for millions more. This is a place of deep restorative stillness. Even though you are moving at thousands of miles per hour through space, everything feels stationary and calm because you are part of the flow. It is like being in the heart of a slow-motion snowstorm, where every flake is a jewel and the wind is a silent pull of gravity. Feel the profound calm that comes from this realization. In the vastness of the universe, there is a place for everything, and everything is exactly where it is supposed to be. You are grounded by the very lack of gravity, held in place by the same invisible threads that keep the planets in their paths. It is a state of perfect balance. There is nothing to do, nothing to fix, and nowhere else to go. You are simply a witness to the quiet beauty of the cosmos, letting the weight of your body sink further into the softness of your bed, as if you were sinking into the softest cloud of stardust. As we drift here in this sea of frozen stars, we begin to notice how the light itself behaves. Even in the deep shadows of the outer planets, light is the storyteller. It reveals the secrets of what these rings are made of and how they are structured. But the way we see the rings depends entirely on where we are standing. From our current position, nestled among the particles, the light is subtle and soft, catching the edges of the ice. But if we were to change our perspective, If we were to move our gaze and look back toward the distant tiny sun, the entire scene would transform. This interplay of light and shadow, of scattering and reflection, is what gives the rings their ethereal glow and determines whether they appear as brilliant crowns or ghostly whispers in the dark. To truly understand the rings, we must look at them from every angle, understanding that sometimes the most beautiful features are only visible when the light is coming from behind. Imagine, for a moment, that we slowly turn our gaze away from the giant planet and look back across the vast empty distance toward the center of the solar system. From here, the sun is no longer the warm golden disk we know from home. It has become a tinny, piercingly bright point of light, a diamond set against the velvet black of the deep sky. But even from this immense distance, its light performs a quiet miracle. When we look back toward the sun, the rings that once seemed dark or faint begin to shimmer with a sudden ethereal brilliance. This phenomenon is known as forward scattering. It is a gentle trick of physics that occurs when light passes through very fine particles, like microscopic dust or tiny crystals of ice. Instead of bouncing the light back the way it came, these small particles catch the sunlight and bend it forward toward us. Think of a sunbeam streaming through a darkened room. You might not see the dust in the air until you look directly toward the window. Suddenly, thousands of tiny golden motes appear dancing in the light. Or think of the way fog glows intensely when caught in the high beams of a car's headlights. The rings of the outer planets behave in much the same way. This is why Jupiter's rings remained hidden from us for so long. From Earth, we are always looking at Jupiter with the sun at our backs, seeing only the light that reflects directly back to us. Because Jupiter's rings are made of incredibly faint smoky dust rather than large chunks of ice, they reflect very little light. They seemed invisible, a secret kept by the king of planets. It wasn't until the Voyager 1 spacecraft journeyed past Jupiter in 1979 and looked back toward the sun that these rings were finally revealed. In that moment of perfect alignment, the dark dust caught the sunlight and glowed like a halo of fine silk, a fragile crown that had been there all along, waiting for the right perspective. It is a beautiful reminder of the importance of perspective. In the silence of space, as in our own lives, the way we perceive something depends entirely on where we are standing. A path that looks dark and empty from one angle may be filled with light and detail from another. We only need to wait for the right moment, the right alignment, to see the hidden beauty that was there all along. This realization brings a sense of peace, a knowledge that even when things feel dim, there may be a brilliance just waiting for the light to shift. As we linger in this backlit glow, watching the fine dust of the rings drift like embers in a cooling hearth, our eyes are drawn back to the majestic rings of Saturn. Even here, where the ice is bright and bold, the light plays strange games. As we scan the broad, shimmering plains of the B ring, we begin to see something unexpected. Ghostly dark shapes that seem to defy the circular motion of the rings. They look like the spokes of a great rotating wheel flickering in and out of existence against the brilliant white of the ice. These are the mysterious spokes of Saturn, and they tell a story of forces far more subtle and invisible than gravity alone. These shapes, known as the spokes of Saturn, are among the most haunting and mysterious features of the entire ring system. If you were to look down upon the rings from high above, you would see them as dark radial streaks, like the smudges of a giant thumb across a pristine white canvas. They appear most prominently in the thick B ring stretching for thousands of miles toward the planet's golden clouds. What makes them so ghost-like is the way they move. While the ice particles that make up the rings orbit at different speeds depending on their distance from the planet, the spokes seem to rotate as if they were solid bars moving in sync with the rotation of Saturn itself. This behavior tells us that they aren't governed by gravity alone. They are being guided by an invisible magnetic hand. Scientists believe these spokes are formed by the smallest, most delicate particles in the rings, microscopic grains of dust that are so light they can be influenced by forces we rarely notice on a large scale. When sunlight hits these tiny grains, or when microscopic meteoroids strike the rings, the dust can become electrically charged. In the cold, thin vacuum of space, this static electricity is powerful enough to lift the dust grains away from the larger ice boulders. They levitate, hovering a few miles above the ring plane like a fine mist. Once they are suspended in the airless void, they are caught by Saturn's immense magnetic field. Because the magnetic field rotates with the planet, it sweeps these clouds of dust along with it, creating those long, dark streaks that defy the normal rules of orbital motion. It is a beautiful and subtle intersection of the two great forces that shape our universe: gravity and electromagnetism. Gravity provides the foundation, holding the massive ice sheets in their eternal circles, while electromagnetism provides the decoration, lifting the finest dust into transient flickering patterns. The spokes are not permanent features. They appear and disappear with the changing seasons of Saturn, lasting only a few hours before the charge dissipates and the dust settles back into the rings. They are a reminder that the rings are not just a collection of rocks and ice, but a living, breathing environment, reacting to the light of the sun and the magnetic pulse of the planet. As we watch these ghostly shadows flicker across the bright ice, we are reminded of how dynamic and ever-changing this system truly is. Nothing in the rings is truly still. Every grain of dust, every mountain-sized moonlet, and every shimmering wave is part of a process that has been unfolding for ages. Yet, as we observe the delicate nature of the spokes and the way the rings are constantly shifting, a quiet question begins to form in the mind. If the rings are so active, if they are constantly being stirred and reshaped by these invisible forces, how long can such a fragile masterpiece actually last? We often think of the planets and their rings as eternal fixtures of the night sky, as old as the sun itself. But as we look closer at the history written in the ice, we find that these magnificent crowns may be far more fleeting than we ever imagined. The beauty we see tonight might be a rare gift, a temporary alignment of matter and time in a universe that is always in motion. We are left to wonder if we are simply fortunate to be looking at the right moment, witnessing a spectacle that was not always there and one that may not stay forever. This brings us to the quiet realization that even the greatest structures in the heavens have a beginning and an end. It is a natural instinct to look up at the night sky and feel a sense of eternal permanence. We see the stars and the planets and assume they have always been exactly as they are now, unchanging guardians of the dark. We often imagine that Saturn has worn its shimmering crown of ice since the very beginning, since the dust of the solar nebula first settled into the shapes we know today. But as we look closer at the physics of these delicate structures, a quiet question begins to emerge. Are rings forever? For a long time, scientists believed the rings were as old as the solar system itself. Roughly 4.5 billion years, it seemed only logical that such a massive and complex system would have formed alongside the planet. However, data gathered by the Cassini spacecraft in its final daring orbits changed our understanding of the cosmic timeline. By measuring the mass of the rings and observing how clean and bright the ice remains, researchers arrived at a startling conclusion. The rings of Saturn are not ancient relics of the early solar system. They are, in fact, incredibly young. Current estimates suggest that the rings may have formed only 10 to 100 million years ago. To our human minds, 100 million years feels like an eternity, but in the life of a planet, it is a mere heartbeat, a fleeting moment of decoration. To put this into perspective, think of the history of life on our own world. Dinosaurs began their long reign on Earth about 230 million years ago. This means that for the vast majority of the time that the great reptiles walked the Earth, they lived under a sky where Saturn had no rings. If a Tyrannosaurus Rex had possessed a telescope and turned it toward the golden spark of Saturn, it would have seen a lonely gas giant, massive and majestic, but entirely bare of its icy jewelry. The reason we know the rings are young is because of their purity. Space is not truly empty. It is filled with a constant thin rain of dark organic dust and micrometeoroids. Over billions of years, this dark soot should have settled onto the ice, turning the bright rings into something dull, gray, and soot-covered. Yet, when we look at them, they are 99% pure water ice, reflecting the sun's light with a brilliant white intensity. They are like a fresh snowfall that has not yet been disturbed by the passage of time. This realization brings with it a profound sense of wonder and a touch of melancholy. It suggests that we are living in a very special era, what some astronomers call the Age of Rings. We are fortunate enough to exist in that narrow window of cosmic time when the rings are at their peak of beauty and brilliance. We are witnesses to a temporary masterpiece, a celestial event that was not there for the ancestors of our world and may not be there for those who follow in the distant future. But why are they temporary? If they were created recently, perhaps by the shattering of a moon or a passing comet that strayed too close to the Roche limit, they are also being destroyed. The same forces that hold them in place, gravity and magnetism, are also the forces that are slowly dismantling them. Even as we admire their stillness from afar, the rings are being pulled apart atom by atom, grain by grain. This leads us to a quiet, rhythmic process that is happening right now, high above the clouds of the gas giant, a phenomenon known as ring rain. This ring rain is a silent, invisible process, yet its impact on the future of the solar system is profound. Imagine, if you will, the vast magnetic field of Saturn, a series of invisible loops and curves that stretch out far into space. These magnetic lines reach into the rings, interacting with the tiniest grains of water ice. When these particles are struck by ultraviolet light from the sun or by tiny meteoroids, they can become electrically charged. Once they carry this charge, they are no longer just subject to the tug of gravity, they become bound to the planet's magnetic field. Like tiny dancers following a predetermined path, these ice crystals begin to spiral. They move along the magnetic field lines, arching high above the ring plane before descending gracefully toward the planet's dark, swirling clouds. As they enter the upper atmosphere, the ice melts and vaporizes, creating a chemical signature that astronomers can detect from Earth. It is a slow, steady migration of material, a bridge of ice connecting the rings to the heart of the giant. The scale of this loss is staggering when viewed through the lens of human time, yet it occurs with a quiet persistence. Every half hour, a volume of water equivalent to an Olympic-sized swimming pool falls from the rings and vanishes into Saturn's depths. If this rate continues, the entire ring system, the most magnificent structure in our local neighborhood, could be completely gone in as little as 300 million years. Some parts, like the inner sea ring, may disappear much sooner, perhaps in just 100 million years. There is something deeply poetic about this inevitable decline. We often view the rings as a permanent crown, a static symbol of the planet's majesty. But in reality, Saturn is slowly consuming its own jewelry. It is a planet drinking the very ice that gives it such a distinctive silhouette against the stars. This realization adds a layer of preciousness to our observations. We are not just looking at a feature of the solar system, we are witnessing a transition. We are catching a glimpse of a masterpiece in its final acts, a shimmering veil that is being drawn back atom by atom, until only the golden sphere remains. Knowing that these grand structures are temporary shifts our perspective, it makes us wonder if other planets once wore similar crowns, only for them to be reclaimed by time and gravity. It also invites us to look closer at the smaller members of our cosmic family. For a long time, we believed that only the massive gas giants possessed the gravity and the space required to maintain a ring system. We thought of rings as a hallmark of giants. However, the universe is full of surprises, and as we turn our gaze away from the massive orbs of gas and toward the smaller, rocky bodies that drift in the cold reaches of the outer solar system, we find that the elegance of the ring is a far more universal design than we ever imagined. As we drift further away from the golden glow of Saturn and the deep blues of the ice giants, we enter a region of space that is sparsely populated by smaller, quieter worlds. For many years, astronomers held the firm belief that rings were the exclusive privilege of the massive. It was thought that a world needed immense gravitational power to capture and hold a disk of debris in orbit. But in the quiet darkness of the outer solar system, between the orbits of Saturn and Uranus, we discovered something that changed our understanding of cosmic architecture. There is a small rocky body known as Chariklo. It is part of a group of objects called centaurs, celestial wanderers that share characteristics of both asteroids and comets. Chariklo is modest in size, only about 150 miles across. To put that in perspective, You could drive across the entire diameter of this world in just a few hours. Yet, despite its small stature, this tiny world carries a secret of immense beauty. In 2013, as Caraclo passed in front of a distant star, observers noticed something peculiar. The star's light didn't just blink out once as the asteroid passed. It flickered twice before the main event and twice again after. This subtle stuttering of starlight revealed the presence of two distinct narrow rings of ice and dust encircling the small world. These rings are remarkably well defined. The inner ring is about 4 miles wide, while the outer ring is roughly half that width. They are separated by a clear, dark gap, a miniature version of the vast divisions we see in Saturn's crown. It is a breathtaking realization. A world so small that it would barely cover a portion of a single terrestrial country possesses a system of rings as organized and elegant as any giant. These rings are likely composed of water ice, shimmering faintly in the dim, cold light of the distant sun. They are held in place by the same laws of physics that govern the entire universe, proving that the beauty of a ringed world is not a matter of size, but a fundamental expression of gravity's quiet grace. The discovery of Caraclo's rings was a turning point. It suggested that rings are a universal phenomenon, appearing in places we never thought to look. They are not rare anomalies reserved only for the elite planets, but rather a common feature that can emerge wherever there is debris and the right balance of forces. This realization invites us to imagine countless other small worlds drifting in the cold silence of the deep, each wearing its own delicate halo of ice, unseen and undisturbed for billions of years. As we settle into the stillness of this thought, we begin to see the solar system not just as a collection of isolated giants, but as a vast interconnected tapestry where even the smallest threads are woven with precision. The same patterns of order and symmetry repeat themselves across the scales of space, from the massive to the minute. And as we look even further out, toward the icy fringes of the Kuiper Belt, where the sun is little more than a bright star, we find that even the dwarf planets, those strange frozen worlds on the edge of the sun's reach, have their own stories of rings to tell. We turn our attention now to a world that is as peculiar in shape as it is in its surroundings, a world that spins so fast it has transformed into a smooth celestial egg. Deep in the frozen reaches of the Kuiper Belt, far beyond the orbit of Neptune, lies a world that defies our expectations of what a planet should look like. This is Haumea, a dwarf planet that resembles a smooth, pale egg drifting through the dark. Haumea is one of the fastest rotating large objects in our solar system, completing a full turn on its axis in just under 4 hours. This dizzying speed has prevented the world from forming into a perfect sphere. Instead, the centrifugal force has stretched it out, molding it into an elongated ellipsoid, a celestial pebble smoothed by the passage of eons. As strange as its shape may be, Haumea holds a secret that was only revealed to us very recently. In early 2017, as the dwarf planet began a slow transit across the face of a distant, flickering star, astronomers across Europe turned their telescopes toward the event. They weren't just looking for the planet itself. They were watching the starlight. As they monitored the glow, they noticed a tiny, precise dip in brightness just before Haumea arrived, and another identical dip just after it had passed. This subtle flicker confirmed the existence of a dark, narrow ring encircling this distant, spinning egg. The ring of Haumea is a slender band, roughly 43 miles wide, sitting about 1,400 miles away from the planet's surface. It is composed of cold dust and fragments of rock, perhaps the remnants of a violent collision in the distant past. The same impact that likely gave Haumea its rapid spin and its two small moons. There is something deeply moving about the way we discovered this ring. We cannot see it directly with even our most powerful cameras. It is too small, too dark, and too far away. Instead, we found it by paying close attention to the shadows it cast against the light of a star trillions of miles away. This discovery highlights the incredible ingenuity of the human spirit. By simply measuring the dimming of a distant light, we can map the features of a world we may never visit. It reminds us that the universe is full of hidden structures, waiting for a moment of alignment to reveal themselves. Haumea's ring proves that these features are not unique to the giants, nor are they limited to the inner regions of our system. They are a common grace, a natural result of gravity's steady hand working on the debris of the cosmos. As we contemplate the quiet, spinning beauty of Haumea, our perspective begins to shift. We have seen rings around gas giants, asteroids, and dwarf planets within our own solar neighborhood. But the universe is vast, and our sun is but one of billions. If the laws of physics are truly universal, then the beauty we see here must surely exist elsewhere, perhaps on a scale we can barely imagine. We now turn our gaze away from our own sun and look toward the distant stars, where we find evidence of planetary rings so massive they challenge our understanding of what is possible. We are ready to leave the familiar behind and explore the grand, shimmering halos of the exoplanets. As we drift further from the familiar orbits of our own sun, we enter the vast, silent reaches of interstellar space, where the possibilities of nature expand into the truly gargantuan. In the constellation of Centaurus, some 400 light years from our home, there exists a world that reminds us just how small our own giants can seem. This is J1407b, a planet, or perhaps a brown dwarf, that has earned the nickname Super Saturn. It is a place where the concept of a planetary ring is taken to its most extreme and breathtaking conclusion. The ring system surrounding J1407b is so immense that it stretches nearly 75 million miles into the void. To put that in perspective, this single system of rings is roughly 200 times the size of Saturn's. It is a structure of such overwhelming scale that it defies easy comparison. There are more than 30 distinct rings in this massive halo, each one separated by wide, dark gaps, where young moons are likely being born from the surrounding debris. The sheer volume of material contained within these rings is enough to form an entire planet the size of Earth. Imagine, for a moment, the visual impact of such a world. If Saturn were to be replaced by J1407b in our own solar system, our night sky would be transformed. These rings would be easily visible to the naked eye, appearing many times larger than the diameter of the full moon. We would live under a shimmering golden-white canopy that would stretch across the heavens, a permanent and glowing architecture of dust and light. It is a humbling thought that somewhere in the deep cosmos there are skies filled with such radiant complexity far beyond the reach of our current travels. This discovery expands our imagination, reminding us that the universe is not just a place of empty space, but a gallery of masterpieces on a scale we are only beginning to comprehend. It suggests that around billions of stars, there may be rings of every conceivable size and composition, ranging from the delicate veils of Neptune to the monstrous halos of J1407b. The laws of gravity do not care about scale. They sculpt the dust of a small asteroid with the same precision they use to arrange the millions of miles of debris around a distant supergiant. Yet, as we float in contemplation of this massive exoplanet, we are reminded of a fundamental truth. Whether a ring system is 40 miles wide or 75 million miles wide, it is built from the same humble materials. The grandest structures in the universe are composed of the smallest pieces. To understand the giant, we must understand the grain. As we pull our focus back from the staggering distances of the deep cosmos, we return to the quiet micro-scale reality of the rings. We move away from the overwhelming whole and find ourselves drifting toward a single, solitary point of light, a lone traveler in the shimmering fog. We are no longer looking at the system as a disk or a halo, but as a collection of individuals. We find ourselves hovering near one tiny frozen fragment, no larger than a snowflake, suspended in the eternal hush of the void. Imagine a single snowflake, suspended in the deep dark velvet of the outer solar system. It is small, perhaps no larger than the tip of your finger, a jagged, delicate crystal of frozen water. It hangs there, weightless, a tiny speck of white against the infinite black. This little grain of ice has a history that spans millions of years. It may have once been buried deep within the heart of an icy moon, protected from the vacuum of space for eons until a wandering comet or the relentless pull of gravity brought it out into the open. Now, it is a permanent resident of the rings, a solitary traveler in a river of light that never stops flowing. As you focus on this one particle, you realize that it is not truly stationary. It is moving at thousands of miles per hour, yet because everything around it is moving at the exact same speed, it feels as though it is perfectly still. It is part of a vast synchronized dance, an orbital parade that stretches for hundreds of thousands of miles. Take a slow, deep breath and imagine yourself drifting alongside this tiny crystal. There is no wind here, no sound, and no resistance. There is only the steady, rhythmic pull of the giant planet below, guiding the ice on its eternal path. Even in this crowded environment, the movements are incredibly gentle. Occasionally, our little snowflake might drift toward another neighbor, perhaps a fragment the size of a pebble or a boulder the size of a house. When they meet, they do not shatter. Instead, they nudge one another with the softest of touches. Scientists often describe these interactions as being like slow-motion bumper cars. Because the particles are all traveling in the same direction, their relative speeds are very low. They meet with a whisper, a glancing blow that barely disturbs their frosty surfaces. Each time these particles touch, they lose a tiny infinitesimal amount of energy. This process is the secret behind the incredible flatness of the rings. Any particle that tries to bob up or down or move out of alignment eventually bumps into its neighbors. These gentle collisions act as a cosmic stabilizer, absorbing the vertical motion and forcing every single grain of ice into a single razor-thin plane. It is a beautiful example of the universe seeking order. Over millions of years, the chaotic cloud of debris has settled into a state of perfect, peaceful equilibrium. The rings are thin because the particles have learned, through countless soft encounters, to move together in harmony. As you watch this snowflake drift, you can feel the calmness of its journey. There is no hurry in the rings. There are no sudden changes. There is only the slow, predictable orbit, repeated billions of times over the life of the solar system. The motion is so steady that it becomes a form of silence in itself. You might find your own breathing beginning to match this slow orbital rhythm, in and out, steady and sure, as you move through the shadows of the giant world. But as our eyes adjust to the soft light reflecting off this frozen grain, we begin to notice something unexpected. While we often think of these rings as being made of pure white snow, the reality is more complex. Our single snowflake isn't just a brilliant, translucent white. If we look very closely at its surface, we can see subtle hints of character, tiny flecks of dust and microscopic inclusions that change the way it catches the light. The rings are not a monolithic sheet of ice. They are a mosaic of color, painted with a palette so subtle it requires the most patient of observers to truly see it. We begin to move our gaze from the individual crystal back to the broader bands, noticing that the shimmering white is actually infused with a spectrum of soft earthy tones. This subtle palette is one of the most surprising features of the outer giants. When we think of ice, we often imagine a stark, clinical white, like a fresh snowfall under a bright moon. But as we drift through the rings of Saturn, we see that the universe is rarely so simple. The rings are washed in delicate shades of salmon, soft grays, and warm, sandy browns. These colors are not painted on. They are woven into the very fabric of the ice itself. It is as if the rings are a great celestial watercolor, where the pigments have been diluted until they are just a breath of color against the darkness. Scientists believe these hues come from tiny amounts of impurities trapped within the frozen water. Just a tiny fraction of a percent of non-ice material is enough to tint an entire ring system. Trace elements like iron oxides, the same material that gives the soil of Mars its reddish tint, can give the ice a warm pinkish glow when viewed from certain angles. Along with iron, there are complex organic molecules often called tholins. These molecules are created when ultraviolet light from the far-off sun interacts with simple compounds like methane. These tholins fall onto the ring particles like a fine, dark dusting of cocoa, turning the brilliant reflective ice into shades of deep mahogany or charcoal. Imagine looking out across a vast, flat plain of floating crystals, where one band glows with the pale pink of a summer sunset, and the next is a muted, sophisticated gray. It is a pastel-colored universe, muted and soft, as if the cosmos preferred to whisper its colors rather than shout them. This variety tells a story of the planet's history, of ancient comets or moons that may have broken apart to form the rings, each bringing its own unique chemical signature to the mix. Each ring is like a different layer of a giant frozen record, preserving the chemistry of the early solar system in its colorful bands. The rings of Uranus and Neptune are even darker, dominated by these organic soots that absorb the light, making them look like charcoal drawings against the velvet black of the void. As you visualize these soft, earthy tones, you can feel a sense of profound peace. There is no glare here, no harsh brightness to strain the eyes, only the gentle, reflected glow of a billion colored gems turning slowly in the dim light of the outer solar system. The colors are so subtle that they seem to change as you move, shifting from gray to tan to pink as the angle of the sunlight varies. It is a landscape of endless, quiet beauty, designed for a mind that is ready to rest. But as we move our gaze further away from the bright, shimmering center of Saturn's kingdom, the colors begin to fade into the deep black of space. We have spent so much time admiring the brilliant, visible jewelry of the planet that it is easy to forget how much more lies hidden in the shadows, waiting to be discovered by those who know where to look. Beyond the edge of the famous, shimmering bands, far past the orbits of the tiny shepherd moons, there is another structure, one so vast and so dark that it remained invisible to human eyes for centuries. It is a ghost of a ring, a silent giant that dwarfs everything we have seen so far, stretching out into the cold, empty reaches of the deep system. There is a ring around Saturn that you cannot see. Even with the most powerful optical telescopes on Earth, it remains a ghost, a secret held by the darkness of the outer solar system. This is the Phoebe ring, a structure so vast and so sparse that it challenges our very definition of what a planetary ring can be. While the bright icy bands we know so well sit relatively close to the planet like a snug, shimmering collar, the Phoebe ring begins millions of miles away, starting at a distance of about 3.7 million miles and stretching outward to nearly 10 million miles from Saturn's surface. It is a realm of such immense proportions that it is difficult for the human mind to grasp without a long, quiet moment of reflection. To truly understand its scale, imagine lining up the planet Saturn itself side by side in a long, straight line. You would need to place nearly 300 Saturns in a row just to cross the width of this single gargantuan ring. If you were to fly through the Phoebe ring in a spacecraft, you might not even realize you were inside it. Unlike the dense, crowded traffic of the inner rings, where ice boulders jostle and collide like slow-motion bumper cars, the Phoebe ring is a delicate, ghostly haze. Its particles are incredibly small, microscopic grains of dust and soot kicked off the surface of the distant moon, Phoebe, by the constant slow-motion bombardment of micrometeoroids over billions of years. Because these particles are so small and so far apart, they do not reflect much light. They are dark, like charcoal or smoke, blend in almost perfectly into the velvet blackness of space. It was only in 2009, when the Spitzer Space Telescope looked at the system through infrared eyes, that this hidden giant finally revealed itself, glowing faintly with the captured warmth of the distant sun. There is something deeply comforting about the existence of the Phoebe ring. It reminds us that even in the parts of the universe that seem empty, there is structure, order, and a quiet sort of beauty. It is a massive, silent embrace that holds the entire Saturnian system within its borders. As you drift further into relaxation, you might imagine this vast, dark cloud surrounding you, not as a weight, but as a soft, protective layer of stardust. It is a quiet place where time moves with a different, much slower rhythm. Out here, the chaos and the bright lights of the inner solar system are a distant memory. There is only the slow, steady orbit of dust grains moving in a graceful, tilted path that follows the moon, Phoebe's unique journey around the planet. The scale of the invisible is often more profound than the scale of what we can see. This ring, though hidden from our eyes, is a testament to the quiet power of gravity and the persistence of time. It is like a giant, silent room in the house of the solar system, a place of ultimate stillness. As you settle deeper into your pillow, let the thought of this immense dark halo soothe your mind. It is a space large enough to hold every worry and every lingering thought of the day, dissolving them into the vast, peaceful expanse of the outer reaches. You are safe here, in the quiet shadow of the Phoebe ring, where the only movement is the gentle, rhythmic pulse of the cosmos. The world is large, the universe is patient, and you are exactly where you need to be, drifting toward a deep and restorative rest, surrounded by the invisible wonders of the night. We are beginning our final descent now, moving away from the specific details of moons and dust, and toward a broader sense of the harmony that holds every atom of this system in place. The harmony of the spheres is a concept that has echoed through human history, a belief that the movements of celestial bodies create a kind of silent, divine music. As we look back across the vast distances we have traveled tonight, from the shimmering crown of Saturn to the dark vertical loops of Uranus and the ghostly arcs of Neptune, we can see that harmony in action. It is a visual symphony where every note is a grain of ice and every rhythm is dictated by the invisible, patient pull of gravity. These rings are not merely collections of debris. They are masterpieces of cosmic engineering refined over millions of years by the steady hands of natural law. In this grand arrangement, gravity acts as the conductor, orchestrating the movements of billions of individual dancers. Ice serves as the medium, catching and scattering the light of a distant sun to create the colors and shadows that define these structures. Without the ice, the rings would be invisible, lost in the shadows. Without the gravity, the ice would drift away into the lonely void. Together, they create a balance that is both incredibly fragile and remarkably enduring. It is a reminder that beauty often arises from the simplest of ingredients, provided they are given enough time and the right environment to flourish. Every single particle we have discussed tonight, from the tiniest speck of dust in Jupiter's gossamer rings to the house-sized bergs in Saturn's B ring, exists in a state of perfect falling balance. To orbit a planet is, in its simplest sense, to be in a constant state of free fall, falling toward the massive world below, but moving sideways just fast enough to miss it over and over again for eternity. This balance is the ultimate expression of grace. It is a weightless existence, a perpetual drift through the velvet dark where nothing is ever truly lost, and everything has its designated place. There is a profound sense of safety to be found in the laws of physics. They are the quiet, unbreakable rules that govern the universe, ensuring that the planets stay in their paths and the rings continue their slow, rhythmic rotation. These laws do not change. They do not tire. They do not sleep. They provide a foundation of absolute predictability in a world that can often feel chaotic. As you lie there, feeling the steady pull of the earth beneath you, you are experiencing the same force that holds Saturn's rings in place. You are part of that same harmony, governed by the same gentle physics that keep the stars in the sky. This realization allows the mind to truly let go. You do not need to hold the world together. The laws of the universe are already doing that for you. Everything is in its right place, moving at the speed it is meant to move, following a path that was laid out long before we arrived. There is a deep, resonant peace in knowing that the universe is a place of order and balance. As we prepare to take our final look at these shimmering wonders, let that sense of order settle over you like a warm, heavy blanket. The great machines of the cosmos are turning exactly as they should, and you are free to drift along with them into the quietest reaches of the night. We are moving now toward the final stillness, where the light of the rings fades into the soft, dark velvet of a deep and dreamless sleep. The outer reaches of our solar system are defined by a silence so profound it is almost tangible. Out here, billions of miles from the warmth of the sun, the noise of the world falls away completely. There is no wind to rustle leaves, no tide to lap against a shore, and no breath to cloud the air. There is only the slow, majestic movement of ice and stone through the velvet dark. As we complete our journey, take a moment to simply exist in that quiet. Let the stillness of the deep cosmos settle over you, cooling any lingering heat from the day and smoothing out the edges of your thoughts. In your mind's eye, take one final walkthrough of these celestial galleries. Look back at Jupiter, the king of planets, where the gossamer rings hang like a faint ghostly veil made of the finest dust. They are barely there, a mere whisper of matter caught in the giant's powerful grip, shimmering only when the light catches them just right. Then move your gaze to Saturn, the undisputed masterpiece of the solar system. From this distance, the individual boulders and ice crystals blur together into a solid, luminous disk of cream and gold. It looks like a record frozen in time, a perfect circle of light that has endured for millions of years and will continue to spin long after we have closed our eyes. Further out, see the dark, narrow ribbons of Uranus, standing tall and vertical against the planet's tilted axis. They are like charcoal drawings against a black canvas, subtle and mysterious, hiding their secrets in the shadows of the deep freeze. And finally, look to Neptune, where the rings are not even full circles, but delicate arcs that appear like broken jewelry scattered across the void. Every one of these systems, from the grandest to the most humble, is a testament to the beauty of balance. They are held together by nothing more than the invisible threads of gravity and the rhythmic persistence of time. Imagine yourself drifting now, high above the ring plane of a great gas giant. Below you, the rings stretch out like a vast frozen ocean, white and brilliant under the cold light of a distant sun. The motion is so slow, so steady, that it feels like standing still. You're watching the slow motion choreography of a billion icy dancers, each one following its own path, yet all moving together in a single harmonious flow. The scale is so immense that it bypasses the need for understanding and simply invites wonder. The planet itself sits at the center of this haunted shroud, a massive, peaceful sphere rotating with a heavy, unhurried dignity. It is a world of soft clouds and deep shadows, wrapped in a crown of light that never fades. As the image begins to soften, let the colors bleed into a gentle, uniform gray. The amber of Saturn, the pale blue of Uranus, and the deep indigo of Neptune all dissolve into the comforting darkness of the night. The universe is a vast and lonely place, but it is also a place of exquisite order. The same forces that guide the rings through the void are the forces that keep your heart beating and your breath steady. You are part of this system. You are a small, precious piece of this grand design. There is nothing left to do now, nowhere left to go. The journey is complete, and the destination is rest. Feel the coolness of the air around you like the thin, crisp atmosphere of a distant moon. Feel the weight of your body as grounded and certain as a planet in its orbit. The light of the rings is fading now, retreating into the soft, dark velvet of sleep. The stars are dimming, the ice is still, and the silence of the outer reaches is finally yours to keep. Everything is quiet, everything is at peace. Rest now. The rings will continue their slow, shimmering dance in the dark, watching over the silent giants of the deep. You're safe in the arms of the cosmos. Good night. Good night.